se rekorda vse skupaj. Jaz bom pol to vrezal, da ta začetni del, kar je zdaj, pa pol na končnici več ne bo snemal, ampak najbolj posnetkov, tako da ja. Ok, čakaj, da si jaz vprašanja vklopim. Prejšnjič nisem imel vprašanj lepo pripravljenih, ko sem za Sašo to imel, tako da zdaj sem se malo boljše pripravil. Dobro. Samo sekunda. Hello and welcome everybody to the interview with Ivona Cholakovic. Ivona is a researcher and expert in fairness in machine learning. She is doing her PhD on this topic, and we'll talk about this topic of hers, the fairness in machine learning, a bit in this interview. So welcome, Ivona.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. As far as I know, you're not far away from finishing your PhD, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, so we're crossing our fingers. It's going to be finished in this year. So good luck with this.
Thank you.
But for this interview, we want to talk a bit more about this topic, the fairness of machine learning. So how would you define even fairness when we're talking about AI or machine learning? So when it comes to making decisions, how would you define it?
So usually when we talk about fair AI, we usually refer to decisions made by the systems that include one or more AI components. And those decisions that are made shouldn't disproportionately harm or benefit certain groups or certain individuals in order to call them fair. This means that these systems value equity, justice, non-discrimination as well.
When you were talking about the groups, what do you mean about the groups?
When I say groups, that means, and usually we are referring to sensitive feature groups, and the sensitive feature is also called protected feature. So it can be gender or ethnicity, age, and so on. So some common feature between people that based on which we can group them, and which shouldn't be a basis of the decision when we are deciding about something. Usually those can be also found in discrimination laws, but only when it comes to human decision-making, not AI-based decision-making.
So what are you saying actually, that the laws define what are these sensitive or protective groups, which shouldn't be, let's say, treated differently by the AI algorithms, right?
Yes, in human decision-making, no, in AI-based decision-making.
Okay.
But we do that based on how it is done in human decision-making. So we kind of transfer that logic of what are sensitive features in the AI.
Okay. When we're talking about treating these different sensitive groups equally, but if we don't treat them equally, we're talking about bias. This word bias, how does it relate to the word fairness in the artificial intelligence?
Where we could also say bias, but I like to distinguish those two terms, where bias would somehow more describe the data itself, mostly the data that is skewed, that is imperfect, that has lower quality. Whereas fairness is more of a human concept of more abstract level and usually describes outcomes of the machine learning model. And by that, we usually mean that we don't want to harm individuals or groups of people, like I said before.
So would you say that the bias in data, like you said, always results in unfair AI decisions, and vice versa? Always when AI is unfair, we always had a bias in data?
I would say that bias can be one of the reasons why the decisions are unfair, but we also have different kinds of biases, some of them measurable, some of them not. But that is why we kind of distinguish between bias and fairness.
Okay. Well, why do you think the AI fairness is challenging, especially when we can't always agree on fairness is in real life? Because if we would debate here what is fair for you and what is fair for me, we'd probably get to the different conclusions. So probably we don't always agree what is fair AI, right? Or do we have like a universal definition of it?
Yes, we do not have the universal definition. And like you said, we are not able to define it in real life. And therefore, we are not able to define it. If we're not able to define it by words, then we cannot define it mathematically. And if we're not defining it mathematically with some kind of equation, that we are not able to measure it. And if we are not able to measure it or to have the measure we all agreed upon, then it can be challenging to optimize our machine learning model for that unclear and opaque objective. But another challenge also comes from the unfair data, like I said before, biased data, which we are forced to use due to the lack of other better data, so to say.
Okay. So when we're talking about different measures of fairness, like you said, what are these kind of measures, or how we call them metrics? How would you define them? What are these different metrics? What do they measure?
So we usually distinguish between the metrics that focus on individual fairness and those that focus on group fairness. So the individual perspective would be just trying to be fair to every individual, and in groups we would say that groups are formed, like I said before, based on some shared common feature, which is usually called, like I said, sensitive feature. And when it comes to those group metrics, we have different types of metrics, or the concepts which metrics are based upon, but mostly used ones are based on disparate treatment, which basically means equal acceptance rate for everyone. So the equal quality of model for everyone. It does not depend on which group they belong to. Whereas we can also have metrics based on equalized opportunity, where things can get a little bit more complex, since we measure an equal error rate. And it actually is important what kind of task we are performing, because the task is some kind of measure of, let's say, quality of individual or the merit of individual. So the predicting someone as a false negative would mean denying them of an opportunity for something better in their real life. So it could mean that we are denying it of some kind of opportunity.
Okay. Can we talk about a little bit more concretely about these metrics? Can we get some examples maybe for some of those? Like real life examples, even if they're fictional, but that relate to our real life?
Yeah, so when we say mitigating having minimum disparate treatment or equal treatment for everyone, equal model quality for everyone, that would mean, for example, we all know our phones are unlocked based on our face features, and it turned out previously that that didn't work well for some demographic groups like women or Black people. So we would want the model to work well for everyone, because that would mean that our phones would unlock on all of our faces, no matter what demographic group we belong to. And that is somehow the outcome is not really, how would I say, a highly valued one. I mean, we just unlock our phone or not. If not, we can try second time. But then if we have an equal opportunity, or was it like unequal opportunity, that would mean that we deny someone from some opportunity, let's say denying someone from being accepted at university, when similar student gets the place and has similar all the other features except sensitive feature, let's say ethnicity or gender or whatever other. So that would be kind of one of example for equal opportunity.
So if I compare, let's say, University of Maribor, here the students are accepted solely based on their merits, so their grades and so on. And on the other pole, we have some American universities where merit is not the only thing they're considering. They also consider the nationality, and maybe they give some more chances to, they say, students from disproportionately lower wealth countries like African countries and so on. We see the difference here, how we measure the fairness, right?
Yes,
So,
exactly.
The universities.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay. So we see there's a philosophy or complexity of how we define this fairness. But still, can we satisfy other quality metrics of AI when we're trying to make them fair? Let's say, can we make AI systems that are accurate as possible and still fair, or is there some kind of trade-off between those?
So aiming at fair machine learning having fair machine learning models and improvement in that regard usually comes with a drop in performance. That is just what the trade-off is. However, I find that if we are able to mitigate the harm technology can have on certain individuals or groups that usually also have some kind of history of discrimination, then we should take that chance.
Okay.
Of course, that usually depends on the organization that deploys the model and the purposes it serves and their goals as well.
Makes sense. What do you think that could be a consequence of using unfair AI in academic settings, like in university settings, for both students and the staff of the university, if we like employ AI for different stuff at the university, let's say student grades and so on?
So AI has been used for certain things in academia for sure. And from the perspective of students, it is used for ranking of students, used for admission decisions like we discussed before. And if those systems are unfair, that means to the certain groups, that means that throughout the years, we would have a less diverse student body. Also use of AI in grading and recommendation system for recommending different support tools or different lectures and tutorials could, if used unfairly, potentially harm students' mental health and distrust in the system and in the education as well, especially since these decisions are, as we know, not transparent enough. And similar stands for staff as well. Hiring, promotion, performance evaluation could all involve AI and thus potentially making it unfair, harming the professional growth of the staff.
Yeah. Well, I find it ironic that research shows that in general, people trust decisions made by algorithms, made by AI, a bit more than humans. They say that these algorithms, they're not biased, they don't have human emotions and so on. But as far as I'm hearing and talking to researchers of fairness of machine learning, it's the other way around. They say we would rather human make decisions about us than the algorithms, which we cannot, let's say, decipher it and understand and so on. So it's quite ironic, I would say. But probably the consequence of this, that we are getting aware of that AI can make unfair decisions. We have some new regulations, especially the new EU's European Union's AI Act. Could you maybe address it a bit? What if there's a fairness clause also in that regulation, and what does it say?
Yeah, so fairness is a part of the European Union's AI Act, which is a first regulation to address AI and all the potential harms it can cause. And it addressed quite a bit of fairness as well. And it tries to ensure that in the future AI systems, or even if in the past deployed but still used, AI systems wouldn't harm the fundamental rights of the people and try to establish the equity and not discrimination. However, AI Act mostly focuses on application-wise AI, or the so-called high-risk applications, such the ones used in medicine, for example, or the fields that can have a huge impact on people, not the whole technology, not the whole AI, so to say.
Okay, makes sense, but still, I'm not too versed in the laws and regulations and so on. As far as I've read it, as an engineer, I find it quite problematic. Let's say they try to put some barriers and some high standards on how fair these AI algorithms should be in the future when this regulation is actually ratified. But as we discussed, there are different metrics or measures how we measure fairness. And I would say if you're quite versed with the technology, you can always say that your algorithm is either fair or unfair, right? So it's going to be quite a challenge to somehow prove that it was universally or by law unfair algorithms or so on. So I'm not too sure how we will deal with proving that some algorithms was universally unfair or so on. So we'll see.
Yeah, exactly. Since we know as engineers and someone who is implementing those models, we think mathematically and we want to have everything strictly defined, whereas law is not always like that. It's a little bit unclear and opaque. So in the AI Act is a regulation, yes, but it's not a guidance on what should you do. It's more of a checklist than some kind of you need to have this number or that number of this kind of equation in order to have model fair. So you can always discuss it if you have done everything that you can.
Yeah, yeah. Well, because we got this regulation, or we will get it soon, there's probably some solutions for making these AIs fairer than they usually are. So what are these approaches so far? As if you know the field, you probably know it. You're the researcher in this field. So would you sum it up for us a bit?
Yes, of course. So the research has been already done on that. This is not something that caught us by surprise with the AI Act. So usually we can refer to we can separate techniques in certain groups, and those groups would then correspond to the, let's say, stages of the machine learning pipeline or the part of the machine learning process where we can actually address the fairness. So firstly, we can do it in pre-processing stages. We call it manipulating data, processing the data additionally by debiasing data sets, removing the correlations between sensitive features and target features, balancing data in order to not have underrepresented groups, and do different kinds of processing of data, but we can only achieve so much on that level. So we also can do it in model learning or training phase, where we try to say to model that it should take into account fairness as well, not only the overall performance, and optimize based on that objective as well. And the third group would be then post-processing techniques, which usually we go to when the model and the data which model is trained on is not available to us, so we only have the outcomes. So we try somehow to adjust the outcomes post hoc in order to make it more fair.
Okay. If I make an analogy of human learning based on what you said, there's also 3 steps. Like the pre-processing step would be if the human learns from the experience, that human would only be put in the fair experience, or they would see fair decisions or fair world, right? And learn the fairness out of it. So in training, like you said, when the model is training, would be when the human is learning from the experience, it would be aware that there's an unfairness and would try to learn based on the awareness that some things are unfair and try to forget the unfairness, right?
Yes.
And post-processing is after the fact that a human learns something new, it realizes, okay, my knowledge is unfair, let's try to correct it. something like that, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Okay. What about your research? How does it fit in these three categories? What would you say your research is?
So mine would be in the introducing fairness in the models learning, because as I said before, data can have lower quality and we might not want that, but that is all we have. So my research focuses on involving fairness in machine learning, because in that model, in that way, we can tell model that it should learn only fair and not unfair patterns that can be found in data regardless of the data quality we have. So I mostly focus on classification tasks.
Okay. What role do you think the fairness of AI will play in the future of academia and education? Does your approach, is it applicable to data in academia and education and so on? Could be applied?
Yes, regarding my approaches, I think there are general approaches. So as far as some decision making is involved, we could use them. And regarding to the future of academia with AI, well, we have stated before the problems that can appear, and as long as we can solve or try to solve the unfair AI in academia, then I think we would be able to open a lot of solving problems that could create more inclusive and equitable education environment. And by that, we would not only impact the current academia members, but also the future one and the future generations.
Okay. As far as I'm aware of AI Act actually categorizes AI systems into 4 categories. The first one is forbidden in European Union. The second one is highly regulated. The third one is, I think it has to be transparent but not regulated. And the last one is the internal regulations only. And I think that using AI in education and academia would fall somewhere in between second and third category. It is allowed, but it has to be regulated. It has to either regulated or just transparent that AI was used on the data or on the results that students, staff, and so on are seeing, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
I think that we usually forgot about education a lot of times, and that education is forming next generation. So we should be able to recognize unfairness and try to be better at it.
Makes sense. For finishing up this interview, can you maybe share us your future plans and what's going on with your work, with your PhD? Or maybe research after your PhD?
Yes, so I'm trying to squeeze in a little bit more of a research before finishing up my PhD. And with that, I would try to, like with expensive computation we usually have in machine learning models or the deep learning models, which are usually could include images which are part of our everyday lives. So it means that we also need to be aware of that in terms of fairness. And there are techniques that help us mitigate that computational complexity. And so we can use knowledge from bigger models in smaller models and do not have to use many resources. So I would try to use some of those techniques in order to capture the knowledge. To, if we say, take analogy from academia and real life learning process. If we would have like unfair teacher, then students, like the smaller model, should be able to recognize unfair patterns and only learn the fair knowledge and get the rest of the knowledge if it needs to from some other resources. So yeah.
Okay,
That
interesting.
is,
You're taking an analogy of human learning, right, to teachers and students, and you put it in as a teacher model, teacher AI to student AI in this one.
yeah,
So actually what you're saying, if the teacher is unfair but is knowledgeable, can students learn the knowledge from the teacher but forget the unfairness, right?
yes, exactly.
Sounds very interesting, so I'm looking forward to read your work. Thank you very much, Ivana, for this interview. I wish you all
Thank
the
you.
luck in finishing your PhD, and see you some other time, okay?
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.